Hello and welcome to this episode of Pure Lifestyle. So this is your first week, or this is going to be posted during the first week at least.
Yeah.
And we wanted to speak about rate of fat loss, or at least expected rate of fat loss, what you can expect, what you should expect, and yeah, that sort of general idea.
Yeah, because I think it's a good topic to kind of accompany what they're going to go for in week one, because week one's very informational based. Week two, you start to talk about more about understanding the calories that you should be on, and understanding what they are and how to apply them into your life. And then with that, I think sometimes you'll have two different kind of spectrum of people that once they've got their calories, they will then probably drop even lower. I'm thinking, right, well, if I drop even lower, I'm busy through the week, so I'm going to lose more weight and so on. Faster and things like that. And then you've got the other side of people who maybe hit their calories once they understand them and then don't get out of it what they expect, and that's maybe a huge amount of weight loss. So it'd be good to kind of clear that up and give people a little bit of clarity on it.
Yeah, so realistic expectations of weight loss are really important, and I think there's an important distinguishable? I don't know how to say that word. There's an important distinction to be made between weight loss and fat loss, and that's especially true during this sort of first week or first 2 weeks, because some of you will experience quite a lot of weight loss, but that doesn't necessarily mean you've lost that much fat. And we know that because fat is extremely calorie dense and you just simply haven't created that amount of deficit. However, you can lose a lot of weight because a lot of weight that you lose, initially at least, is water weight. And that could be because you are having a less salty diet, so you're retaining less water. Maybe your food volume's gone down, although it could potentially go up, besides the point. Maybe you're eating less carbohydrates. So all these things require a lot of water to store, so you tend to, when you start dieting, lose quite a big chunk of weight. So it wouldn't surprise me if someone lost 5 pounds in a week. However, we know that that's not 5 pounds of fat. So I think that's sometimes where this unrealistic expectation comes from, because people think, oh, I can lose 5 pounds a week. Great, I'll just keep losing 5 pounds a week. Then I'll be sorted. Like, I only have whatever to lose anyway. That's definitely not going to happen. So you have to expect that the rate of weight loss is going to slow, because it's more accurately going to represent fat loss as opposed to some fat and some water. And the standard sort of estimated fat loss that you could lose in a week is 1 pound. And people say that, so if you Google sort of fat loss in a week, you'll normally get this 1 pound a week figure that people should aim for. And that is because 1 pound of pure fat is 3,500 calories, which would equate over the week to being in a 500 calorie deficit every day. Now that's probably about what you're in, depending on how you've set up your calories. But yeah, estimated about, we probably want you to be in about 500 calorie deficit a day. Usually people will use percentages to work out your deficit. So you'll go from your maintenance calories, take roughly 20%, and that'll be your dieting calories. And that 20% does tend to be roughly around 500 calories. So it does work out like that. And that's sort of where this 1 pound a week rate of fat loss comes from. Now, the main issue with this is that we try to measure fat loss on the scales. And 1 pound is a very small amount of weight, which can easily be masked by numerous different things, especially if you're not consistent on the scales. So women, your menstrual cycle will have a huge impact on fluctuations in weight. Even things like a pound is really not very much. So if you're wearing a t-shirt and a jumper when you weigh yourself, as opposed to weighing yourself naked or something, that's a huge difference. Or if you have half a cup of tea before you step on the scales, that's gonna, you're not gonna see the fat loss that you've made that week. So I think understanding that the scales actually aren't really a sensitive enough measure to measure fat loss week on week is something to bear in mind. And people get really hung up on the scales. So, really disappointed if they haven't lost weight that week. But there's so many factors that could be masking fat loss on the scales.
Mm-hmm. No, that's kind of what you've just went through. Kind of just triggered me to think about the group that I'm working with at the minute, where I've got a couple of females who've been really disappointed with the rate of weight loss after the first initial 2 weeks. So they were happy with the first initial 2 weeks. It was 3 to 4 pounds. That then slowed down to actually putting £3 on and then going back down to where they were and so on. So then it started to kind of hit a brick wall about not to half a pound to a pound a week over the last kind of 6 or 7 weeks. And their unhappiness with that rate of weight loss was then made to feel better because they took photos from day one and kind of measured them from week to week. And that was huge, because if you were to think about, I don't know, any type of weight loss programs that you've done in the past, everything is normally measured off just scale weight. And people will normally stop and terminate them behaviors, the new behaviors, because maybe you're not progressing as well or as fast. So kind of a good thing to do, either on Pure Lifestyle or whether you're not on it anymore or whatever, is if you are starting new behaviors or a new program or a new regime, whether it's for holiday or whatever, is to start taking maybe photos from the off and get someone to kind of take them for you, so they can be in the same place with the same clothes every single week. Because it's been huge for my group, that has. Because I know for a fact they would have become really demotivated without that. Mm-hmm. And they've also measured, and we do this on Pure Lifestyle, they've also measured kind of habits over the 8 weeks. So they've started to look at habits that they wanted to improve, and they've gone on, and they chose them themselves, and they've gone on to improve them. So they've measured progress in 3 different ways. One of them that's kind of demotivated them, but the other 2 that's really motivated them. So yeah, having a different view of rate of weight loss will be good for you too.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And having like numerous factors to measure your goals or measure your progress. And then it always comes back to, we speak about this a lot, but the reason why you want to lose weight isn't to weigh a certain amount on the scales. It's to look a certain way. It's to feel a certain way. It's to be more confident. The reason we don't measure those things is because they tend to be harder to measure, but we do need to find ways that we can at least try to measure them. So things like, you know, if you want to get in a certain dress size, like, are your measurements coming down? If you want to look a certain way, are you looking better in progress pictures? If you want to feel a certain way, measure your feelings. You know, are you generally more confident? Now, these things are quite subjective, which makes them harder to sort of put like a quantifiable number on, unlike the scales. But the scales don't give that full representation. So I think having things like gym performance, measurements, your progress pictures, they're all massive. And if there's a week or so that you're not losing weight on the scale, that can show you that you're still progressing. And I don't know anyone, I mean, I've had a few men who have literally continuously lost like a pound or 2 a week, textbook, completely standard. But I've never worked with a woman who has just lost weight every single week on the dot, like your standard £1 a week. The sort of science behind it makes sense. That's the energy deficit you're in. That's the amount of fat you could potentially lose a week. But that will not show like that on the scales. It never does. There's always fluctuations, and there's absolutely nothing you can or should be trying to do about it. You just sort of need to accept that that happens, and having these other markers allows you to see progress even on the weeks that maybe your weight even goes up a little bit.
Yeah, like I'm the same. I've never really had that with a female, apart from actually an older female that's on the group at this moment in time that's kind of gone through the change and so on. And she's progressed every single week. But with that, there was a higher percentage. We put her through a bit of a higher percentage of a deficit, more so because she tried things in the past and has recognised that she does go to a fact of underreporting, for example. So yeah, that's the only kind of instance I've ever come across. But something that you said at the start, and I think this will help personal trainers as well as it will help members of Pure Lifestyle, is, I've just touched on it then, is a 20% reduction of the maintenance calories. Do you want to kind of break that down? Why would it be a 20% reduction? Like, give some kind of context behind that, because I'm fully on board with it, but it'd be good to get people to understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, so essentially when you start with someone who's on a weight loss journey, you would try to, and remember that all these are estimates, so you're going to estimate how many calories they currently need to maintain their current body weight. Then from there, if you want to lose weight, you know that you need to reduce those calories. Now, I touched on this yesterday about, everyone says how important patience is, but if you're not creating a big enough stimulus to change, you're going to have to be very patient and you're never actually going to make any change. So that drop in calories needs to be big enough and substantial enough to actually see a difference and make a change. So I find that about 20% is a good reduction there. The importance of it having a percentage as opposed to just a number is that, let's say I have an office worker who's only 5 foot tall, isn't very active. Her maintenance calories to maintain her current weight might only be 1,500 calories. If I just whap off 500 calories from that, she's going to really struggle to stick to that diet. Whereas if you drop by 20%, it's much more realistic for her to stick to. So that'll be 300 calories instead of 500 calories. Whereas if I had a man whose maintenance, is much taller, bigger man, maybe his maintenance is 3,000 calories, I can probably afford to drop a bit more than 500 calories. So using a percentage again makes it relevant to him or her and their sort of energy expenditure to start with. Now, in certain individuals, or depending on their goals or what they've done before, you can drop more or less than that. So some people I might actually drop more. It's kind of maybe the example you just used. If I really want to show someone that they can lose weight and give them a bit of confidence, I might say, right, I'm going to do maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks of quite restrictive dieting. So like give a big calorie deficit so that they get a bit of confidence, they lose a big amount of weight. I do that especially if someone has a lot of fat to lose.
Yeah.
Partly because even when you do drop a fair amount of calories, they're still on a fair amount of calories because they started on such a high maintenance calories. And partly because often they might feel too heavy to exercise at that time. So you're going to bring them into a more, they've lost a bit of weight, they're feeling a bit more confident, they probably feel a lot better when they're moving, they're more open to doing exercise at that stage. So maybe they want to lose a bit of weight before they start exercising. And that gives them that bit of a boost as well. So there are, I wouldn't set as a hard and fast rule, only ever do a 20% deficit. But that does tend to be about the ballpark that I would start on. And yeah, you can if it's the other way where someone's already quite lean and they probably don't have that much more to lose, but maybe they're trying to get to competition prep or something, you might only drop by 10% and take a slower approach. And it really just depends on the individual. But yeah, 20% it tends to be a good sort of ballpark figure.
Yeah, and I think we do have like you've said before, if you Google kind of rate of fat loss, and what you'd want is ideally it would be a pound a week. Therefore, there is that change in message and communication within the fitness industry right now to go, right, well, if you're not doing something that's sustainable, then it's not worth doing. But some people are at a point, like the female that I talked about before, where they may have an externally motivated goal as well internally motivated goal. So like a wedding in the summer or whatever that may be, when they feel like they really need to push. And they want to push and they're ready to do it because their lifestyle allows that. So who are we to turn around and say, no, it has to be half a pound to a pound a week? And this is something that if you're kind of in this mindset, it might be a conversation with your pro lifestyle coach and go, right, I know you've done it around 300 to 500 calories and you're working out percentages, but do you know what? I'm ready to push a little bit harder for these 6 weeks especially. And that's why I bought the program. Don't shy away from that because it's something that it's great for the coach because you're probably going to get great results in a short space of time. And it's very easy to manage if it does get too much, that you can just push back. And I think another thing on this is this whole sustainable approach where people will maybe put someone in a 10 to 15% deficit. This is a message to obviously personal trainers as well as members, but you're then on a bit of a tightrope, aren't you? Like the majority of people do underreport on their calories if they do tracking it. So if you are underreporting and you're on 10%, it doesn't give much room for mistakes and kind of underreporting or underreporting itself. But yeah, so the 20% for me allows also for underreporting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you make a few really good points. And I think a lot of the time in fitness, and it's so easy for us to do, is that like, you're surrounded by trainers, you're a trainer yourself. This may be how you would diet, but bearing in mind you're already a lean individual.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's say you have someone who has a lot of fat to lose, they could afford to be in a much bigger deficit, and it's not like quote unquote dangerous for them because they're not limited on energy. Like all fat is an energy excess. So they're storing a hell of a lot of energy, and they can use that. That's the whole point of dieting. And if you put them in a bigger deficit and they can stick to it, that's absolutely fine. And I think a lot of people come really looking for that big change. Now, I know that Pure Lifestyle is mainly all about small changes you can make to your life to make it a bit healthier. But some people are really attracted, especially if they've reached that sort of point of change. Like they've maybe been overweight for a long time. They've maybe been putting off dieting. And now they're like, do you know what? It could be that something's happened. And a lot of the time it's, you've gone to the doctors and they've said, do you know what? You're now diabetic. Like if you don't change your lifestyle, you're going to have to go on treatment. Like these are the things that could happen. Sometimes that gives like a wake up call to someone and they want to make a big change. They don't want to just like swap your crisps for like lentil crisps and, you know, stop using as much butter, and like they want big change. And that, like, you kind of have to be adaptable to that, and it can work really well, and it gives them that confidence that once they've started, you know, they say a huge amount of weight loss initially, it gives you a huge amount of confidence. So I think remembering where your clients are, if you are already a lean individual, like you don't want to drop that many calories. If you have a lot of body fat to lose, you can be a bit more extreme in your approach if you want to do that. But yeah, I think a lot of it is down to personality type, and I think that we don't consider that enough. It's really hard to sort of generalize, like, and that's what we you know, we're trying to help people and give them general tips. So we can't really say exactly what's going to work for you. We can give you advice, but a lot of it comes down to personality type and the type of person who maybe does want to track calories or who doesn't want to track calories, someone who wants to take a bit of a more extreme approach, in the knowledge that at some point they will have to come back to a more moderate approach. Yeah, and then obviously for some people taking that more extreme approach is a negative thing for them. And for other people, they can quite easily sort of see what it is for what it is and switch on and off to it. So
yeah, just on this last lab, probably one of the last points. I touched on it before, and you have kind of thrown out like their expectations, and you started off with obviously it's going to potentially be fast weight loss at first, then you might hit a brick wall, it might go up a few pounds and so on. Like, I think it's important to end on like managing your expectations in a case of like, if I was to take you through the average person who I work with right now from a female fat loss demographic, like they will lose a hell of a lot first, and then that will slow down. And then depending on at what time of the month they're in, they will probably put weight on or stay the same. And you have to recognize that that's going to happen and manage it from a mental point of view. It's not an opportunity for you to go, right, well, this isn't working for me, so I'm going to terminate these new behaviors and just go back to where I need to be. It's all actually part of the process. Like, God, I've got people who I'm working with now who will fluctuate sometimes in the week of the period or before to 5 or 6 pounds that week up. But the previous week they've been flying and everything stayed the same. It's just maybe holding a little bit of water. Maybe have took the calories up slightly because I've recommended them to, because we've seen it's affected in the past. But I think you just need to recognize that it's okay and it is all part of the process. And if that continues, then obviously you need to readjust and reassess things. But yeah, it's just part of the process, I suppose. And I just wanted to touch on that to kind of end on it, really.
Yeah, really good point, I think. And we could go on and on about this because now I thought of something else I want to say. But just briefly, like your weight loss journey does tend to be that you have like a quick initial weight loss, then it slows a bit, and it will go up and down. But on a general trend, it'll be going down. Then you might plateau for a while, and that'll be because the initial calorie deficit you thought you created, let's say it is that 500 calorie number, is getting smaller because you're becoming a lighter person and expending less energy. So maybe now you're only in like a 200 calorie deficit. So you're probably not going to see much weight loss and it looks like you've plateaued. At that point, you might think, right, I need to create a bigger deficit to continue to lose weight. So I either exercise more or I reduce my food intake, or probably a combination of the two. And then you will again continue to lose weight. And that's a completely normal thing. So you'll see that big drop, slow, and then maybe a plateau and then drop again. And yeah, I think just acknowledging that is what's going to happen, and that's sort of how fat loss works, and that it's just not going to be that linear line that we'd maybe like.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest progress markers for people who I work with, either on Pure Lifestyle or wherever, that when they've recognised that it's £2 or £3 on, and that's fine. Like, I know, like 8 weeks prior to that, that would have been like, oh my God, I'm failing, and like, this isn't working for me. So it's a huge progress marker for me that they've recognised it, and it's cool, it's part of the process, and I can just crack on. And so next week's another week. So yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Anything else?
No, we've nailed it.